The 2024-25 Premier League campaign is on the horizon. In preparation, we're previewing every single team and discussing how they'll shape up over the next campaign. We take a look at the transfer business conducted by the teams so far and offer suggestions of who else they should move for before the season gets started. Today, our attention turns to Brighton. With the youngest manager in Premier League history at the helm, we discuss how Brighton can bounce back from a difficult 23-24 campaign. This is our 2024-25 season preview for Brighton. Alright, let's talk about Brighton then. I think last season for Brighton was one, definitely felt much worse than the seasons before for Brighton. Under De Zerbi, I think they went into the season with a lot of confidence because the prior campaign had been so strong, but it didn't seem to click for them last year.
Yeah, very much so. It was a positive start, I think, and then it did kind of slip away towards the end, and I think it was a bit unnoticed because I think more people focused on the fact that Man United were climbing and Chelsea were climbing rather than the fact that Brighton was slipping down the order, which I think, as you say, it'll be a bit of a shame for Brighton fans because they've had a good run of it the last couple of years of being in Europe, being in the top 6, 7, 8 teams. So it was a little bit of a drop this season. To be outside the top 10 is probably a bit below expectation, to be completely honest, over the last few years. But yeah. It's not a horrific season, and I'm sure they're going to build on it into a new season, which is kind of a new. There's new objective. There's a new era at Brighton.
Yeah. They finished 11th in the Premier League in the end, and I think rightfully some of the flack has to be on De Zerbi's back because I do think his system relies too heavily on individuals. But equally, you look at Brighton's recruitment, or more importantly, their outgoings last summer, and it's no wonder they had the shortcomings they did. They sold Moise Caicedo last summer. They sold Marc Cucurella the summer before that, I think. They've had Alexis McAllister left the club. They lost so much of what their midfield makeup was with those two departures. And then, Billy Gilmore's done really well this season, but he's had injury concerns towards the end of the campaign. I don't particularly... Dahoud didn't have a good 6 months and they loaned him out. Milner's not really Premier League quality. Pascal Gross has carried this club on his back this season. And Baleba looks decent, but it felt like their midfield lost their way there. And, they've had injuries at both fullbacks. Lamptey spent most of the season out injured. Estupiñán spent most of the season out injured. They didn't really embed Barco since they signed him in January. I think he might have had a few knocks as well. So they've had a lot of injuries this season, Brighton, with the combined fact that they were playing Europa League football, which obviously added to the number of fixtures. It became very difficult, and they were spreading an already thin squad over many competitions. So it felt like that scalability for Brighton, but has gone too quickly, and they hadn't replaced the players from last summer. So yeah, it was a bit messy. And also Robert Sanchez, another one that they sold, and they've had a weird goalkeeper thing where they haven't decided between Steele or Verbruggen. They kept rotating them, which I just don't think can work in football. You need to have your starting goalkeeper. Have a cup goalkeeper, sure. Have your Europa League goalkeeper, but in the Premier League, you need to have a set number one. I think that's been proven by Brighton and by Arsenal over the last few seasons. So, yeah, for De Zerbi, I think his system relies on certain individuals. I've spoken about in the past how if he was to go to a big club, I think it works. Because with those infinite riches of Wild Boys said he should be the Man City manager once Pep leaves next summer. Now he's gone to Marseille and we'll see how that works. But I've always said he should be the City manager because I think with infinite resource, he is tactically incredibly 100%. Good. But the issue for him is that you're not always going to get those incredible players. Yeah. And with Brighton this season, he didn't have his new Moise Caicedo. He didn't have an Alexis McAllister, and his midfield fell apart as a consequence. So yeah, going to be interesting. Let's talk about the new man, Fabian Hürzeler. I think a lot of people won't know much about Fabian Hürzeler, and that's probably because a lot of people don't know anything. Nobody knows him. He's 31, coming from the German second tier. It is a big gamble of an appointment, but there are a lot of factors that make this a smart signing. Yeah, it is a very interesting one, as you say, because, only 31 is incredible. Great to see such a young manager coming into the Premier League, and he's breaking records, and he'll be hoping to be breaking even more as he comes in. But as you say, it intrigued me a little bit because I feel that after which was a bit of a poor season, to then take a gamble is a very interesting way to go about it. But we know Brighton, they're ambitious, they're adventurous,
and they like to hit their goals in different ways to everyone else. Because most people would go, right, we were below par a little bit last season. Let's stabilise and let's sort that out. But no, I like it. They're going ambitious. They're going, let's bring in this guy. He'll be the youngest manager in Premier League history. Yes, everyone will turn around and go, who is he? But at the end of the season, we might have to sack him, or we could be back in the top 7, and then suddenly everyone knows who he is and everyone loves him. So I like it from Brighton. Obviously, from Brighton fans, they might not like the fact that the club's kind of gambling a little bit there with the manager, but overall, I think it's a very intriguing appointment.
I don't think there's any risk though. Brighton aren't a top 6 side who should be hitting Europe every season. For me, there is so much reward for so little risk. I can't fathom Brighton going down. Because the teams below them are just so low quality comparatively that I can't see that happening, especially with the signings that Brighton have made already this window. Even if it somehow goes terribly with Hürzeler, which I don't think it will, but even if it does, they'll have enough time to be able to recover it if they make a change in January. I don't think there's a huge risk here, and if he is successful, well, I mean that could go so high. So I think it's a gamble worth taking, it's a risk worth taking. As you say, he will become the youngest permanent manager in Premier League history. Only Ryan Mason's interim spell at Tottenham just props him so far. But yeah, so just to look for his career path, he started at FC Pippins-Ried, a smaller side in Germany, then became the Germany U18s and U20s manager, then went to St. Pauli in the Zwei Bundesliga. He saved them from relegation, got them promoted into the Bundesliga this season. He'll never get to see that project through though, because he's heading off to Brighton. I like a lot of what I watched a bit of St. Pauli to prepare for this. I like a lot of what I've seen so far, and I've read obviously a few people who've watched a lot more St. Pauli. From what I can tell, he is very keen on width, and we're going to look at his 3-4-3 in a little more detail in a moment. But one of the more interesting things he does is a centre-half pushing into midfield, and that feels very Pochettino-esque, like what he used to do, but sort of the inverse with Eric Dyer dropping into the back line. So that's really interesting to see who plays that role this season. We're going to talk about options for that as well. I think that Hürzeler's bringing in a lot of very interesting tactical principles.
Yeah, 100%. I think what he does on the pitch is phenomenal. I think my main concern is obviously that lack of experience. Not even, it's St. Pauli, yes, obviously they're a decent side and what he's done there is very, very good, but yet to manage it in a top flight of football that is, a strong quality, and to be chucked straight into into the best league in the world is going to be a tough job. But to be the best, you've got to beat the best, I guess. And if he believes himself, clearly he backs himself to come in and to adjust. I think that's the important word for Brighton, is adjusting, because with De Zerbi, it was, I feel like we talk about it all the time with De Zerbi, but his tactic, if there was problems, there was an issue with it, he didn't adjust, and they either won 4-0 or they got battered 4-0. That is the main thing. Hürzeler's going to have to adjust things because it won't be the same as it was in Germany. It will be very different, so he may have to tweak a few things, but he's got to be proactive with that. But apart from that, I think he's a good manager.
It's that pragmatism that a lot of young managers lack, and it's simply because they don't have that experience. They don't have tools in their arsenal they know and they can rely on. We saw the same with Postecoglou. When it went wrong, he'd be more stubborn in his ways, and I respect it in a manager. You've got to be like that. If you don't have a backup plan, you've got to double down on what your initial plan is. I think that could be a potential stumbling block. However, Hürzeler is bringing lots of interesting tactics into the league. It's going to take a while for anyone to figure him out, so that could definitely stun a few people until January, which could give him time to work on other stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how Brighton shape up. Let's have a look then at their outgoings and incomings. We'll start with the outgoings, since there are very few of them, one of which is Adam Lallana's free transfer to Southampton. Now, while this is a beautiful story, it's not a big loss for Brighton.
No, I don't think so. Adam Lallana, don't get me wrong, he's a decent footballer. I think it's nice to see him back at Southampton, and he'll be a good part of their squad for that. But Brighton going on to bigger things, they want to be pushing back in towards Europe. Adam Lallana isn't going to be part of that squad. No. I don't think that's too big of a shame.
No, but I'm hoping to see a Ross Barkley-esque career resurgence for Lallana this season, potentially playing a bit of a deeper role in that Southampton system and impressing. That would be fun to watch. The other player departing is Kasper Kozlowski. I have to say I've not watched a whole lot of Kozlowski. No. He is leaving for Gaziantep in Turkey on an undisclosed fee. I don't think it's a huge loss. He's one of those who they signed as like a player that could develop. They sent him out on a few loans. It didn't really work. He's not played a whole load of first team minutes, and yeah, there's no harm in just letting that go now.
Yeah, no, I think so.
More than enough players.
I've managed him in FM. That's as far as my expertise goes on him. He was quite good actually. He developed quite well. So maybe you never know.
Big mistake then from Brighton. But let's have a look then at the incomings, because these are very exciting. The first one we spoke about in a short couple of months ago, actually.
Yes.
Ibrahim Osman, FC Nordjylland, coming in at £16 million. I think it's a really good signing. I mean, we spoke about it again, as I say, at the time. He is part of the Right to Dream Academy, which is an academy set up in various African countries to try and funnel more talent through into these academies. Nordjylland obviously benefit heavily from that because they bring those players into Norway. It's Norway, isn't it? Norway, Denmark, can't remember which. But then they look to sell them on to these big sides. I think for 16 million, what he's shown so far playing for Nordjylland, he could be a real star.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, as you say, we've touched on him before. He's a very very good talent, and he could be a very very good player. It is. I mean, he fits Brighton perfectly. It's their model to bring in an exciting player that has the potential to develop. It's not, the fee's not too bad, so if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. If it does, though, again, it's going to be another one of those signings where we see Brighton make a massive profit if they are to sell him on down the line.
Yeah, definitely. I think that he'll be given a chance to impress in pre-season. If he does, then we could see him part of the first team squad. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him get a loan move. Could even be to their feeder club out in Belgium, Union Saint-Gilloise. They do a lot of business there. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that this season. Up next, Yankuba Minter joining from Newcastle for 30 million. This is a big one. Obviously, spent last season out on loan in the Eredivisie. He did very well out there, and it was somewhat surprising to see Newcastle let him go. I imagine it was FFP reasons, and to be fair, does he start in that Newcastle team? It's a debate, but I think he definitely should be getting a lot of minutes for Brighton this season, probably more than he would at Newcastle.
Yeah, I really like this guy. I think he's a very, very good player, and again, he's that same thing. He's gonna, he has the potential to go very, very far. I think you're right. I think Newcastle, if they could have kept him, they probably would have chose to. But I think this is another good deal for Brighton. I like Brighton. They make really good transfer business. This is another good representation of it. Hopefully, for Brighton's sake and for Minter's sake, it's going to work out.
Yeah, definitely. So, it's obviously Hürzeler loves the Eredivisie because the other side, next signing, Mats Weifer from Feyenoord for 25 million. Weifer's been linked with a lot of top clubs, Liverpool, Manchester United, clubs like that. This is a hell of a coup from Brighton.
Yeah, 100%. It's one of those signings that's going to put them up towards that higher bracket they want to be pushing for, want to be aiming for next season, is to sign players that are linked to the very top teams in the league. By doing that, you bring your ceiling, you raise your ceiling, and you raise your quality of the squad to get closer and closer to matching those teams. And that is important for Brighton. This is an important deal.
Yeah, definitely. So I think 25 million is a really good price to pay. I wouldn't be surprised if Brighton kept looking at Feyenoord because there are some other options there that could improve their squad. But yeah, I think Weifer's a really nice signing. I think that Hürzeler will have an interesting tactical plan with him. We speak about who might be that centre-half pushing into midfield. I think Weifer could play that role quite nicely. So we'll be interested to see what he does with Weifer. But yeah, I think it's a really good signing for Brighton. It shows that they're there to compete for transfers with these big clubs. Up next, you've got Malik Junior Yalkuye. Now, a lot of people won't have heard of him, and understandably so, because he's plays for IFK Göteborg out in Sweden. But basically, he is a very active midfielder. He's quite slender, quite small. However, despite that small stature, he definitely puts himself about. Very physical play. He's a very energetic midfielder. Shades of N'Golo Kante there, but he is a little less defensive. The other interesting thing is that he, obviously we speak about those ball-winning qualities, but he's also really good at carrying the ball forward. He's a good dribbler. And for me, he profiles more similarly to someone like Kobe Mainoo, who perhaps wouldn't be able to play as the base of the midfield, but in a slightly more advanced role or in a pivot, that could definitely work out nicely because got great ball carrying and numbers, really good as well at winning that ball back, a tenacious player. So I think he could definitely work as part of midfield too. I wouldn't expect him to see him as some sort of lone DM. But as we say, if they do play with the centre-half pushing into midfield and they can create a double pivot there.
Yeah.
That's something that I think could work nicely with Yao. He's very young. He's only 18, so I don't think he'll be playing a whole lot of first team football this season. But and again, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him go out on loan. But he's someone I think's got a really high ceiling and someone Brighton will be keen to develop over the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of players like him because, you know, when they're on the pitch, whether it's for 90 minutes or 10 minutes, they cover every blade of grass. You know, they run everywhere. They don't stop running until they get that ball back. But the difference with him is rather than get the ball back and then play it on, as you say, he gets the ball back and then he takes it on himself. And I really like that. It's the energy. Players that have energy are very, very good players because, I mean, you name it there, Mainu and Kante, to put him in names like that, it is very, very strong. Two very good players. I mean, we know how good Kante is.
Obviously not saying, just for clarity, that he's on that level, but he profiles similarly to those players, and I think the potential...
Definitely could be,
It's the same sort of pathway.
Same with Mainu. Mainu's still got potential as well. We're not saying he's as good as N'Golo Kante.
Definitely not the finished article yet, and slightly different players, but it's a similar profile there.
Yeah.
And then the final sign for Brighton was a free transfer from Arsenal, Mario Kosier Duberry. He looks really good. He played a pre-season game. I think he scored in it recently for Brighton, and I think it's a really smart pickup. A free transfer from the Arsenal academy, plays on the right wing. I don't really see any issues with this at all. There's again free transfers. There's no risk there. Again, you'll question why did Arsenal drop him from the academy? Why is he not included in their future plans? But for me, I look at it as more of a really good coup from Brighton, a really nice signing, and again, low risk, high reward.
Yeah.
If he fails, it's a free transfer. You move him on for a bit of money, potentially. If he succeeds, it's a free transfer. What a fantastic signing that is. So, yeah, really good business from Brighton, which is what we are used to seeing from Brighton. And I think the key thing this window is they've not had any major outgoings. They've not lost an Evan Ferguson. They've not lost Van Hecke. I mean, this could still happen this window. But they've been fairly secure. They've not lost Estupiñán, Mitoma. If Mitoma can come back to his form, he's one of the most dangerous players in the league. So Brighton's income has been great. The more core thing is that they haven't lost a whole lot of players.
Yeah.
However, that lack of business does ease them with a very bloated squad. We'll put it on the screen now. When I was piecing this together, I've included a few people I think maybe will be in the youth squad this season. Will probably head out on loans and stuff like that. But it's nice anyway to sort of understand what players Brighton have on the books. We'll start in goal and with the defence because it's actually not a very stacked back line. Obviously now they're switching to potentially a three-back system. They're going to have to sign players for that because they don't have a whole load of centre-halves. In goal, they're fairly comfortable. Got Verbruggen, Steele and Rushworth. Now, if they are to make either Steele or Verbruggen the number one first choice, I wouldn't be surprised if the other one is thinking about their options. I think Verbruggen's more likely to be that first choice goalkeeper. But the thing is, for Steele, why not go out and look at options? Because I think, for a club like Ipswich Town, probably not now they've signed Muric, but that would have been a really nice option. For Southampton, I know they've got Bazunu, but still, is he Premier League quality? I'm not sure yet. Leicester might lose Hermansen still, so I think promoted sides will be looking at him closely. I think, though, at the moment, a lot of clubs will be put off by the fact he may still start for Brighton. So why would he leave? I think if he does become that second choice, he will probably look at his options. But yeah, I think he is a good player. Both goalkeepers are fairly good. I think Verbruggen's got that really high ceiling, though. We saw him perform really well at the Euros. I think Hürzeler will likely make him first choice, Steele second choice. I wouldn't be surprised if Steele then looked at his options.
Yeah.
In the back three then, to play left centre-half, they've only really got Igor. And I've seen a lot of Brighton fans online not particularly big fans of Igor. I think that he didn't have the best first year in the Premier League, though a lot of Brighton fans do want to see a left-footed centre-half player, similar profile to Levi Colwill, because it just means you're a little better in possession if you've got someone on the left-hand side who can play with their left foot, who's confident on that, it just works nicer. I think that Igor's a good player. I think they would potentially look at signing someone who'd start over him and keep Igor as a rotation option. So I think that's definitely an area that Brighton will look to improve. Obviously, you can play right-footed centre-halves there, and they have got Van Hecke, they have got Webster, they have got Duncan Veltman, so they cover the other two options. The key thing about that central centre-half spot is that's the one that's most likely going to be that libero type role, that roaming into midfield type role. Now, the big question mark for me is over who does that. I don't think Veltman or Webster could do that.
No.
I think Igor, potentially, it's more likely to be looking at a Van Hecke or Lewis Dunk. Obviously, Van Hecke is probably the most mobile out of the options. Yeah. You've also got Lewis Dunk, who's very good on the ball, though. So both those could be good options. You could also look at someone like Carlos Baleba, or you could look at Matt Zweifer, as I've already spoken about. Both those players could be an interesting choice to play that centre-half pushing into midfield role. The big question mark is, can you get that working in pre-season before we get into the Premier League season? Because it is a very different role to what they're used to. So that is a big question mark for me. However, their midfield would be able to cope with a little bit of movement, because we'll go there next. They've got Weifer, Baleba and Yarkue, who you would consider more defensive midfielders. And then you've got Gilmour, Gross, Milner, Ayari, Moran, Puipion, the Australian guy, and Dahoud. That's a lot of central midfielders. Now, again, Ayari could play a little bit deeper, Puipion could play a little bit deeper. So they're not all like attacking midfielders, but they're all a bit more playmaky than the three I've just mentioned. The big thing is, Gross' link with moves back to Germany. Billy Gilmour's strongly linked with a move to Napoli, with Antonio Conte very keen on moving him over there.
Yeah.
That then suddenly leaves you with Milner, Ayari, Moran, Puipion and Dahoud. Now, yes, that's a lot of options, but are any of them good enough to play in the Premier League week in, week out? I don't doubt their potential ability, but I don't think any of them are Premier League quality players yet. So I think there's a big question mark there.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where it looks like you've got loads, but as you say, if you sell one or two and then you loan one or two out, suddenly you're left with three players that aren't the greatest. I mean, as you say, Dahoud hasn't done well. Milner,
fantastic rotation option, but you don't want him starting.
Exactly, his legs are running out. So that's definitely, despite the fact it's so deep in there, I think it could be an area that is perhaps looked on. But for me, I'd only look at it if you are to lose a few of them.
For me, Gilmour's the key one. If they sell Gilmour, you can't not replace him because he's a very, very talented player. I think that his career's been marred by weird transfers and injuries so far. 100%. Obviously, the Norwich loan move didn't work out for him. Then he was sold to Brighton. He didn't really get much playing time under Potter. Finally, De Zerbi showed a little bit of belief in him, and then he got injured at the back half of last season. So it's a shame Gilmour just hasn't fulfilled that potential that he showed at Chelsea. I still think he's a very talented player, and Napoli would be a really nice destination for him. I think though it'd be wise for him to stay at Brighton right now.
Yeah.
I think Brighton's a really good place to be. I think that having that confirmed starting role in the midfield in the Premier League is probably where he's best suited. But I guess we'll see what he personally wants to do. If he's encouraged by the Conte project, then maybe now's a good time to jump ship. But I think he's still got a lot to do in the Premier League. He's got unfinished business there. Even if he wants to go abroad, I'd like to see him back eventually. But yeah, I think he's a very good player, and Brighton can get very good money for him. Let's look at fullbacks then, or wing-backs as they'll be in this system. At left-back, you've got Estupiñán, Barco, and I'll throw Solly March in there. Because I think, obviously, Solly March is a winger, but I think he'll be more likely to be used as a wing-back. You look at the players that they've got in wide options anyway, they definitely don't need any more. March, I know he's come back from injury, so he's not going to be... I don't think he'll be fit to play the first game of the season, because he's only just returned to the grass now. So... he's had a very long time out. I'm hoping we see him back to his best this season.
100%.
I think at left wing back, they're very comfortable because they've got Estupiñán, they've got Barco, and March could definitely play there. March could also play at right wing back, but they're a little less comfortable. We've got Tariq Lamptey, who spent most, if not all of last season, I think, out injured. Again, he's had so many injuries.
Yeah.
I don't know what they do at Chelsea, but all of their players just go on to have injury-riddled careers. But you've also got Jack Hinshelwood, who obviously we saw make a load of cameo appearances given their injury crisis last season.
He was all over the place.
He looked really good.
I mean, all over the pitch. He wasn't dreadful. I mean, he played so many different positions last season. He's very versatile.
Obviously, naturally, he's a central midfielder. So that could be an option. If Billy Gilmour goes, that Hinshelwood plays in middle midfield. That's why I think Brighton would be keen to look at a right wing back and have a bit of competition with Lamptey. That would then push Hinshelwood into a midfield role.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the attack. Then we're going to look at some transfers that I think Brighton should be looking at least. Left hand side, you've got Miedema, you've got Adingra, you've got Osman, you've got Seema. Seema spent on the last season out on loan at Rangers. He's not played much first team football at all for Brighton. I don't think he's played a single game actually. He's had a lot of loan spells, none of which have been particularly impressive. He was a little better at Rangers last season, so we're starting to see that improvement. But at 23, the question mark is over his ceiling there. And if you've already got limited minutes, because you've got Miedema on that side, you've got Adingra, who could play both flanks. You've got Osman, who you'd like to give some rotation minutes to. I don't see where Seema fits in there. And if you're giving Seema minutes over Osman, that's a weird one for me. So unless Osman goes out on loan and they want to have a third choice left winger, I don't see Seema sticking around. I think Osman will likely go out on loan unless he just looks unbeatable in pre-season, in which case, why not keep him around in the squad to see what he can do in the first team. On the right-hand side, there's a lot of depth. I think a bit of this will be culled. I think that Minter and Ciso Buonanotte are first-team players there.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of love for Jeremy Sarmiento at Brighton, and understandably so, but I think it's going to be another loan move for me, or potentially even a permanent. I'm surprised we've not seen Ipswich pining for that signing, because he was really good for them last season, and obviously they don't have a load of money, but they've already spent 20 million on Amari Hutchinson. If they can get Sarmiento for a decent price, I think they'll go for it. I think they'd even take him on another loan. Because familiar with the squad, familiar with the management, that would make a lot of sense. For Brighton, I don't really see where he fits in. Mazalou, 19-year-old Romanian winger, he was out on loan again last season. I think he was in Romania with that loan. I think another loan move is probably on the cards for him. He's only 19. There's no rush to get him into the first team. He seems to have really good potential, though. So I think that's someone they'll be watching closely. And again, I think St Gilwar could be a nice destination for him. Koji Dubbery, I'm not really sure where he's going to play. It could be a loan move. I think within the English football pyramid would be quite nice. Maybe a League One, maybe Championship loan. I wouldn't be surprised if he stayed and tried to fight for minutes in this first team. It's very difficult to do so.
Yeah.
However, they could even try him at wing back. He's a little more defensive than players like Minter and Ciso and Buonanotte. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried him in a bit of a deeper role. Again, we'll see what happens in pre-season, but he's definitely doing well in pre-season, so he could stick around and fight for minutes. Yeah. The big question for me in this system is what do you do with Ciso and Buonanotte? Because they can play right wing, but they are both more attacking midfielders, and I think you do lose their threat when you don't play an attack midfielder. So that's a bit of a shame, but again, I don't think Hürzeler's going to make huge tactical adjustments for Julio and Ciso. No. And he definitely can work on that right wing. And then in the front line, Ferguson, João Pedro, Welbeck and Dennis Undav. Undav's strongly linked with moves away. I really like Undav, but I don't think it's going to work out for him at Brighton. No. And actually, he was fantastic at Stuttgart last season. And if they're not going back in for him, I'd be very surprised as to why. Welbeck, it's going to be likely as last season. He signed an extension till the end of next season. I think he'll move on after that. In Ferguson and João Pedro, you've got a potential future front line for the next 10 years.
100%.
So I'd try as hard as you can to hold on to that. Anything above 80 million, you let Ferguson go. I don't think there'll be many bids for João Pedro, but if you were to get something in the 40, 50 million range, I think you'd be stupid not to sell. But other than that, I think you try and keep with those two as much as you can. They're both very talented players. If Ferguson can stay fit this season, with Pedro as backup and Welbeck as the rotation option, if they really need him, I think that's a really strong front line. I like this Brighton team. I think it really fits the system, but it does need a few little additions. So let's talk about additions or potential additions for Brighton. The first I'm going to suggest is David Hanko. Now, we've already seen how much Fabian Hürzeler loves Feyenoord, loves the Eredivisie. Hanko will be a really nice addition to that love. He might as well just build Arne Slot's team back up now that Slot's gone. But yeah, I think he profiles interestingly. Obviously, his defensive numbers are going to be a little lower, and as you can see from his FBref profile on screen now, his defensive numbers aren't incredible. But Feyenoord were very dominant last season. The key and very interesting stat is to look at those passing numbers. He ranked in the 96th percentile for crosses because he can play left back as well. So that is another option. He could play left wing back. But that left back role on support, funneling the ball to the wide player is definitely going to suit him. 99th percentile for progressive passes, 99th percentile for progressive carries, 99th percentile for passes completed. He's very, very comfortable
Loves
on the ball.
pass.
Obviously, Arne Slot's very true. Obviously, Arne Slot's team are very possession-based teams, so there is going to be that focus on having the ball at feet, and so you could say those numbers are slightly inflated. However, it does show a comfortability playing high possession systems. I wouldn't say Hürzeler's system's a very high possession system, but they definitely do like getting the ball down and playing football. So I think it would be a really nice fit. He's tall, he's Slovakian, big, strong defender. I think he'll suit what he's looking to do. And in competition with Igor, you'd expect Hanko to start, but there's going to be competition there, and competition places is always healthy.
Yeah, 100%. It's exactly what Brighton need. He's a top quality centre half. I think not only obviously he is very good, but centre half is exactly what Brighton need. It's that, as you say, it's that competition, but it's also that depth in defence, because the big difference for Brighton last season between defence and attack was when players like Miedema got injured, we saw how Adingra stepped up and was brilliant. when they had defensive woes, the players weren't there to keep that level of quality. So bringing in another centre half, especially on the level of Hanko, would be a very, very good deal.
Yeah, very true. And then the other option I'm going to talk about, right wing back, is Kyle Walker-Peters. Now, this is someone Brighton have been linked with in real life, and those rumours have gone cold, but I'm going to ignite them back up again. I think, understandably, now that Southampton are in the Premier League, it's a much more difficult move to pull off. They were probably looking at bringing him before Southampton got promoted. There was a large point in last season where it didn't look like Southampton would come up. So I think that was when they were looking at him. Now they face competition from West Ham, from Southampton, because they are in the Premier League, so there's not that impetus to sell. So I think it's a very difficult transfer to pull off, but looking at his profile, he looks very good. He ranks in the 99th percentile for progressive carries, the 97th percentile for progressive passes, and the 99th percentile for touches, so he loves getting on the ball. And obviously he's very good at carrying the ball forwards. Now, if Hürzeler's sides are looking at how they progress the ball next season, having a right wing-back who can just fly up the line, especially if you've got Minter, who's who loves to cut inside, you've got Enciso and Buonanotte, who are naturally attacking midfielders, having a very aggressive right wing-back to overlap them could be a very nice thing to have in possession.
100%. I really like Kyle Walker-Peters. I think he's a very, very good player. He's been key for Southampton over the last couple of years, really. I think back, was it the season where they went down, where him and Livramento got injured, and it was just like that. It was just flat for Southampton. But I really like Walker-Peters. I think he's a very, very good player. He'd add a lot to this Brighton side. And again, as you say, it's that competition for places. It's that depth. If you're going to be competing for in 3 competitions next season, Brighton are going to need to bring their A game in every one. And to be able to if they manage to bring in these 2 players just to strengthen their defensive line, it would be very strong. Very, very strong.
Yeah, and I'm sure Brighton will be looking at their options, because they definitely need to bring in another defender, I'd say. If they're going to play a 3 at the back, you want to have at least 6 centre-halves in there. Anymore, it's a lot. But again, if they're young, it's not too bad. I think they'll definitely want more right wing-backs, because Lamptey his fitness isn't reliable, and Hinshaw Wood is a good player, very young though. You don't want to have to rely on that in the Premier League. So I think they will look at a right wing back. Whether Walker-Peters is doable now or not, that's going to be interesting to see. Again, I'm sure they'll have their eyes on many different options for that right wing back. They do need to be a bit more of an attacking fullback than anything else, and I think Walker-Peters would flourish in that role. He is a very good defender, as you can see, but his tackles blocks aren't too high. I think that if he was to play a more advanced role, that would benefit him massively. Yeah, I think that both are good signings for Brighton. It'd be interesting to see whether they could pull either of those off. So looking at next season for Brighton, where do you expect to see them competing?
I mean, do you know what? I'm going to be optimistic for Brighton and for Brighton fans. I'm definitely hoping to see them back inside the top 10. That's the thing. I think on last season, they did only fall out of it towards the end. It wasn't like they were out of the top 10 for the whole season. So yeah, I'm expecting an improvement on last season, definitely. I've got optimism for Hürzeler and Brighton. If they're in European places, great. If not, that's understandable, because it is a very high quality battle at the moment for the European places. There's loads of teams in the running, and sometimes you might be the right side of that line, sometimes you might be the wrong side of that line. For Brighton, if they get Europe, brilliant achievement. If they don't, I don't think they'll be too frustrated, because it is, as I said, it's very hard to get into that top 7. So overall, I'm expecting an improvement for Brighton.
I think it'll be an improvement, but I think it'll be marginal. In my opinion, though, you will be in and around the same place. I think either 10th, 11th. I think if Hürzeler starts the season really strong, then they'll put the thing that marred them last season was inconsistency. I don't think that'll be the same issue now. I think what they'll have is that if Hürzeler starts strong, they'll get a load of good results in the early part of the season, and they may even find themselves like top 4 or something mental like that. However, once teams figure out what he's doing, I have question marks because of his age and inexperience. Can he adapt? Can he adjust his tactic? Personally, I don't think he'll be able to. And that's understandable, because he's young, he hasn't got those options. So I think they would fall away. If it's a slow start, obviously they might get poor results in the opening games. I could see a similar thing to Iraola at Bournemouth last season, where they have a really slow start to the season, and you've just got to believe in him. Because once that clicks, once it works, as we saw with Iraola last season, once it works, they'll fly. I think they'll start the season either top or bottom, and then eventually middle out at some point in the campaign. So that's my prediction for Brighton.
Fun season for Brighton.
I was going to say it's going to be interesting either way. It's either going to be really depressing and get good, or it's going to be incredible and taper off a bit. Yeah. But either way, I think they'll be in and around that 10th place. I can't see them getting Europe this season just because of the strength, and they don't. And unless some of these players they've signed come in and are instant, just immediate world beaters, or Hürzeler is actually the next Pep Guardiola. I don't think they're going to have that revolutionary sort of charge at the Premier League, but you never know.
They'll be there to pick up the scraps if we see some of the big six falling away. If Chelsea have another poor season, if
Chelsea can't beat Celtic, then
exactly. I think they'll be there. They'll be waiting. If one of the big lot drops out, Brighton will be there to punish. But that's the only way they'd get Europe for me.
Yeah, definitely so. It'll be interesting to see what happens next season, though. I think the future looks bright for Brighton. Ironic. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they get on. That is everything, though, for today. If you haven't watched any of our previews so far, go ahead and do so. There'll be one linked on screen now. That'll be yesterday's, which, of course, was Brentford.
Yes.
So go and check that out. But we'll be talking about Chelsea tomorrow, so look out for that. And do get your thoughts in the comments below on everything we've said in this video. But thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.